Howdy there, Twitch. Welcome to Howdy Partner. My name is James Spencer. I am a partner solutions architect here at AWS and one of the producers on Howdy Partner. Howdy Partner is a show where we bring on our AWS partners to show us what they have built on AWS and show us how they can make your life easier, make more innovative, scale faster, do things better, just be a better person all around, better developer. Today with me is my co-host, Mr. David Daniels. How are you doing today, David? How's everything going?
I'm, I'm great, James. Great. Thanks for having me on. Happy to be here.
Yes.
Happy to talk to our partners today and learn about some cool solutions going on out there. Who are we talking to today, James?
So I heard Caylent is coming on. At least, I'm low on the totem pole here at the show. That's what they've told me. Do you know what they're going to talk about? Have you heard anything?
I've heard something about something called Control Tower. You know, Control Tower and organizations and some other things that help you organize your AWS accounts.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that they've told us where they have something called the Caylent catalysts, and one of those is specifically targeted using AWS Control Tower. It can get really crazy when you're trying to, you're an enterprise organization, you've got your prod accounts, you've got your dev accounts, you've got your admin accounts, your billing accounts, your logging accounts. And then you've got organizations trying to match, those up. And then you've got Control Tower on top trying to help you, keep all that straight. So with Caylent Catalyst, they can even leverage that even more and make things even easier for your landing zone. But I'm not the professional. I don't know this stuff as well. Today we're joined by Mr. Randall Hunt. We'll bring him on. How you doing today, Randall?
Doing well. How is everybody?
Good, great. Did I say anything wrong? That was like the
10,000
10,000
foot.
mile view of things. Maybe you can get us closer to the 10,000 foot view.
Well, people think of multiple AWS accounts as kind of an isolation boundary between different workloads. And at the end of the day, you still need to enforce some sort of control and process around them. And there's a lot of history behind it all. AWS Control Tower didn't come out of nothing. It actually used to be a pretty, you know, like ad hoc thing. It was a CloudFormation template that people would deploy. It was this thing called AWS Landing Zone, and essentially, like it just became so common across all of these different organizations. There's a little pun in there for the people who do follow AWS organizations. That they made it into AWS, made it into a service, and it's pretty powerful. It's very customizable, but I think a lot of people are unaware of the level of customization that's possible. And then, Caylent, we are Caylent. We're an all-in on AWS solutions integrator. So we build things for different customers on AWS, backends, front ends, everything in between. And at the end of the day, we're just a bunch of coders who are, we have product ADHD and we don't want to sit there working on one thing all the time. So that's why we all became consultants.
Nice. Awesome. Do you want me to pop up your screen or?
Sure.
Beep.
All right. Well, I'm not going to bore everyone with slides. I got maybe like 15 of them, and then we can click into some demos and we can do some questions. I did see Red Grimoire that you had a deep question about S3, and I might have a deep answer for you. So if you want to type out your question, I'll take a stab at it. But anyway, so my name is Randall. I'm a software engineer by training. I started out doing physics, and then I found out that physicists don't make any money, so I decided to be a software engineer instead. And I ended up going to work at this small company called MongoDB. Back then it was called Tengen. Saw that company grow from 10, 15 people into like 600 or so, and then I ended up working at AWS. So I used to work at AWS. I was there for a real long time, and I loved it. It's a great place, and there's a lot of cool stuff to work on there. Took some time off to go work at a company called SpaceX. I led the CI/CD team there, where we kind of did a mixed match of physics and materials engineering and firmware engineering and software engineering, all good fun. I was
All
there.
these small companies.
Yeah.
I've never heard of any of these, David. Have you heard of Mongo? I mean, just in
Mongo.
passing, maybe.
And you know,
Yeah.
I came back to AWS after that. That was the crazy thing, is after we landed some rockets at SpaceX, I decided to come back to AWS and spent a lot of time there. Ended up going to Meta after that, which was then called Facebook. That was weird. I enjoyed my time there. It was working on PyTorch, which is a machine learning framework. But you know, now I'm at Caylent. I'm a huge fan of Caylent. I really love some of the stuff that we're building, and I'll talk more about that later. But who's ready to learn about Control Tower and AWS organizations and all that good fun stuff?
Yeah,
I
right here.
passed.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Sweet.
I passed it on my certification. Oh, and then I was going to bring that up. I actually talked to my team about this a little bit. So we have our own kind of like accounts where we can, build stuff and play around with here at AWS, but that typically doesn't involve things. Those are usually the more like builder type services.
Oh yeah.
But we don't really usually get to touch like organizations, admin, those kind of things. So this is specifically for me is going to be very interesting for sure.
Awesome. Well, we'll jump into it here, and just random fun fact. I started this Twitch channel, so back in 2016, I registered this domain and this thing, and I ran it by myself for years. And the reason I did that is I broke my leg, and I couldn't travel, and I was like a marketing role, so I was like, let me just do a Twitch channel. And so if you go way back to all the early videos, it's just me trying to build stuff on AWS.
Nice.
So
That's cool, Randall.
it's kind of
I've
surreal to
got
be
a
back here. I
question.
love it. Go for it.
Yeah. So early on in studying for some of my essay exams, it was pretty common for uh, a confusion between control tower and organizations and where one ends and the other begins and how they work together. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, maybe help some people
Yeah.
out.
So first I'll cover organizations, and organizations is kind of the underlying component of Control Tower, but then Control Tower itself comes with a lot of different customizations, and you know, it's a pretty broad service. Um, so organizations has been around for a pretty long time. It's a tried and tested AWS service. Um, but here we're going to skip this little thought experiment, but uh, you're we'll talk through organizations, and then we'll talk through control tower itself, and I'll try to like explain where the boundaries are, but they are blurred, so it's very like your instinct to say that it's blurred is correct, especially with some of the evolution of control tower. So um, we talk to a lot of different organizations of every size at Caylent, and one of the issues that we face is uh, people want to move quickly. They have these sort of complex products that are deployed either in multiple accounts or single account, and they're just trying to build stuff. And they want to do that with controls, but they don't want those controls to be so onerous that they get in the way. So you want to have this capability to balance like the governance, the spending, the IT compliance, all that good stuff, the security especially, while also preserving that agility. And that's one of the things that I love about Control Tower is it gives you the best of both worlds, and you can kind of carve out different these things called OUs, organizational units, as needed. So AWS organizations, it's a place to centrally manage and provision accounts, and you can create these things called SCPs, or service control policies, which will apply across the different organizational units. You can have some units that have very strict security controls imposed upon them, and then you can have other units like a sandbox or a developer playground that's just off to the races. Do as much as you want. And then you have some other benefits. So uh, I see this question from Harstead that says, I don't know what Caylent is, so I asked ChatGPT to give me a good question to ask. How do you manage and optimize Kubernetes clusters and workloads for your customers? We have this thing called a Kubernetes catalyst. A lot of our fixed fee projects, we call them catalysts, and we leverage the EKS Blueprints project, which is an open source project from AWS, to kind of provision rapidly these clusters. And multiple cluster management is always a good fun, especially multi-region, multi-cluster management. That's also fun. But we can talk more about those things too if you all want. And I saw the S3 question. I think we should come back to the Red Grimoire's question about S3 after we get through some of this. All right.
Yeah, for sure.
So, the organizations, service itself like is pretty standard. It's a UI that's basically a hierarchical tree of accounts that you can shove into different things. But underneath, there are a number of services that you can leverage alongside. There's the service catalog, which is how we will provision accounts with Control Tower in a little bit. There's AWS Systems Manager and AWS CloudFormation, which are our primary means of deploying things as infrastructure as code within these accounts. There's AWS Resource Access Manager, which is fantastic for being able to do this multi-account sharing. So if you have a VPC in one account, like maybe that's your networking account, you can share that VPC to other accounts and allow people to provision different things within it. You've got your backup policies, so you can set different rules for different OUs so that this has to be backed up because of some compliance thing, like you got to comply with HITRUST or HIPAA or FedRAMP or all those good fun things. And then you've got all the security tools, which are worth talking about. But there's some best practices around organizations. And so at your organization, you're going to have something called the root. The root is kind of the account that is responsible for payment. You typically have your consolidated billing for all the accounts in that root account. Occasionally, and actually this is a recent feature, you can delegate the billing administration to a different account. And within that root, you're going to have a couple of like foundational organizational units. One's going to be security. One's going to be like core infrastructure. This is going to be stuff like your VPN and your audit logs and all this other good stuff. And you have to create these. You have to create these individual AWS accounts, and you have to spin them all up. And then you've got a bunch of other accounts that are pretty useful, like or OUs that are pretty useful. You've got a sandbox. The sandbox is pretty much where I spend all my days. That's a Fresh Prince of Bel-Air joke. Anyway,
I
we,
gotcha.
I think he said playground, not sandbox, but you could call it a playground. You can call it a sandbox. This is the one where there are no rules. You just go in and you can provision whatever you want. And then if you spend too much, someone's going to come and like knock on your door and say, hey, bad developer, don't spend so much. Workloads, that's for real world stuff. This is your prod. This is the stuff that's actually running for real. Policy staging is a useful little OU to have because it helps you test out different changes before you deploy them to all these other accounts. So let's say you're doing a new S3 region restriction. So maybe you want to make sure data can't go to like, I don't know, the US region, or the data can't go to like the Germany region or something. You can test that policy out, that SCP, service control policy, in that policy staging group. You got suspended. These are accounts that you can't necessarily delete yet, but you don't really want anybody to have access to them. You've got individual business users. These are, things like BI, QuickSight, tools like that. You have exceptions. These are, get this, exceptional. No, these are accounts that you're not entirely sure what to do with them. A lot of times I'll see people who are going through a series of acquisitions, like M&A workloads. I'll see them put a bunch of stuff in exceptions, and then they have, Jira tickets that are like, hey, we're gonna pull each of these out into the correct category and the correct OU over time to make sure that it's all working. And deployments is normally for your CI/CD stuff, and then you've got transitional, which is stuff that's in between, and you're in the process actively of moving the account around. And so
Hey,
you can
Randall.
see, yeah,
Oh,
go for it.
sorry. So one of our common requirements that we have in our foundational technical reviews is CloudTrail logs being in a separate administrative domain. Which one of those would that be in the infrastructure
That would be
account?
in
Which
the
one of those would
security
fit in?
account. And
Security
and
account.
cloud.
Got it.
So Control Tower doesn't use these exact same OUs, but I'll show you how they set up CloudTrail. And then the other really cool thing that came out late last year was org level CloudTrails. So it used to be you would have a CloudTrail per AWS account, and then you would have to write uh, some connection stuff to kind of bring them all into one
Yeah.
audit account. You don't have to do that anymore. So there's something called org level CloudTrails now, which are really, really powerful, and you should turn them on. It is frankly a little bit of a pain to transition from non-org level CloudTrails into org level CloudTrails because you lose a lot of your historical data. And that's one of the things that we've solved for at Caylent is because we have a lot of customers who already have these multi-account deployments, and they're like, hey, I've got all this great historical CloudTrail data. I don't want to lose it just by turning on this org CloudTrail thing. And so it's complicated. There's not an easy way of doing that for myriad reasons. Like you have different S3 encryption keys,
Oh yeah.
and like the multi-account access for those keys is all complicated. So one of the fun things we did a a little while ago is we created an Athena federated query to be able to search through CloudTrail logs across multiple accounts. That was pretty cool.
Nice. But joke's on you about the pain thing, because I'm into that. So
all right. So this is how you might imagine things. You could have in your prod account for security, you'll have a test OU, and that's just where you're kind of, testing new things before you roll them out. And then you have another prod OU. This is the real world, real deal. Somebody better have some MFA, multi-factor authentication, before they get into this thing. The security break glass prod is something I always try to tell people about. And if we can take a brief interlude here, I'm gonna say, all the automation in the world is not gonna save you. Like you cannot legislate against failure, because it will rear its ugly head in a million different ways. Like if US East 1A 3 whatever goes down, it's not going to go down the same way twice. It's always going to be a weird, like maybe it's only some nodes are down, or maybe it's only like one part of this is not, it's a network partition. I don't know what part I'm talking to. So those break glass manual orchestration accounts are so important, because a human can make decisions that the automation is not going to be able to make. So having that break glass account for both Kubernetes and for just general stuff is always superpower.
yeah.
I've seen some thundering herd problems in my time where people have just had automation spinning stuff up, breaking, spinning stuff up, breaking, spinning. So
What's that saying? Assume everything breaks all the time.
exactly.
Something like that.
I think that's a Wernerism. All right. So yeah, basically what happened was this multi-account infrastructure was becoming real common, and then I can't remember what year it was, but AWS released this solution. Maybe it's 2014, and it was called the landing zone. And this is like a CloudFormation template that you could deploy. It would spin up a bunch of stuff, and this is before the age of step functions. Hell, it was before Lambda. I mean, it was early days. So um, it evolved over time, and it took on new capabilities and new services, but it became this amount of undifferentiated heavy lifting that AWS was like, hey, why don't we just turn this into a service? And lo and behold, it became a service. You get all the best things from that that landing zone template from back in the day, but it's now in a first class AWS service. It's got its own API namespace and everything. And it's, pretty interesting. And I see AIM has joined the chat. Alrighty. So here's a quick vocab talk. AWS organizations, we've covered that. OUs, you're going to hear me saying that a lot. That's an organizational unit. Landing zone. Landing zone is what control tower initially deploys in your account. That is a well-architected multi-account environment with the security best practices, all the scalability, and all this other good stuff. Guardrails are a combination of AWS config rules and organization service control policies that enforce behaviors in control tower managed accounts. So we'll talk more about that in a little bit, but it's pretty easy to set this up. And the first thing that you really need to think about is identity. So who is accessing these accounts, who is ultimately working with them. And so you have this thing called an IDP. Have people heard that term before? IDP? It's an identity provider.
Heard of that one.
You've got, the gamut. You've got like Active Directory, you've got Okta, you've got all manner of them, and they all kind of use a protocol called SAML and SCIM to sync their identities around. And there's a thing called AWS SSO. My apologies, sorry. It's now called Identity and Access Management Identity Center, IAM Identity Center, formerly known as AWS SSO. So what happens is you take your IDP, wherever it is, like Google, Active Directory, Okta, whatever, you tell your IDP to work with AWS SSO, and you begin syncing users and groups and all that other good stuff. And then you can go and provision whatever things you want on behalf of whatever users you want.
Hey, Randall, I'm seeing a question from Hartstead in the chat asking what a customer support time is like from Caylent.
So we're consultants, so we work, right alongside the customer. So we're there. I'm not going to say literally 24/7. If we need to be, we can be, but we're not a product company, so we don't really like sell products per se. We have engineers who work alongside a company and help them build whatever it is they want to build. And we kind of like we like to think of it as we keep focused on AWS and the cloud and all that hard stuff so that customers can build their product. Like they don't need to be experts on the latest and greatest in AWS. Let us do that, and then the customer focuses on the product. So, I mean,
The
yeah, I mean,
undifferentiated heavy lifting,
oh
removing
yeah,
that. Yep.
we sing that song. So once you get your identity and access all set up, you establish a couple guardrails. You can automate the account provisioning, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And like this isn't a one-time thing. Like this evolves over time. New capabilities come out all the time. Control Tower has had several releases, thankfully, in the last couple months. And each time they push a new version of that landing zone, you need to deploy it, and you can take advantage of all of this new stuff. And with that comes various niceties, but also occasional migration pains. Not, they're the problem that AWS often has, honestly, is like they've been around for a while and they were the first company to ever like move on this sort of stuff. So they did things that made sense back in 2009 that if you were to look at it now, you're like, wait, why is it this way? And I think people don't cut AWS enough like slack for the fact that they're still running APIs from literally 2006 that they've never deprecated. Like those APIs are still available. Like, so I don't know. I see a bunch of stuff on Twitter all the time, and it gets me kind of riled up.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Or no.
It takes a lot to support that sort of stuff,
No, I know. I'm being facetious.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Definitely updating stuff is. I mean, everything's changing all the time, so you have to.
Yeah. So I mean, this is what it looks like, and I'll jump into a different screen in a little bit, and we'll actually set one of these up. And then rather than wait for it to provision, don't worry, we'll hop over and we'll actually move to one I've already set up so that we don't have to sit around and watch CloudFormation doing its thing. So this is the general layout. So you've got your management account. You've got this sort of AWS Control Tower service, and then underneath that AWS Control Tower service, you have these things called the AWS Service Catalog, and this is used to provision new accounts. It uses this service called Account Factory. This is very customizable. You can throw in whatever sort of CloudFormation you want. You can make calls to third-party services. There are a bunch of partners like Datadog and F5, and I don't know. You can name 100 different partners, and they probably have something that you can provision alongside Control Tower. So it's really, really useful. The service catalog, you can find whatever it is you're looking for. We work pretty closely with this company called Snyk, SNYK. And yeah, I mean, they do great stuff. They have a Control Tower template that you can deploy alongside your accounts. So we often use that because it's really well done. And then, the AWS Control Tower, it ends up managing your AWS organization, which is tied to your AWS single sign-on, which is talking to, whatever it's talking to, whatever identity provider you want. And you've got your core OU, and then you've got kind of like custom stuff that you can spin up. But within that core OU, you're going to have an audit account. Oops. The audit account is responsible for collecting notifications and actionable config changes across all the different accounts, security notifications, all this other good stuff. So the audit account has the ability to look into all of the other accounts and make sure they are following all the config rules and that they're not doing things that are outside the service control policies, which are normally prevented from an API layer. And then you got your log archive account, and that's where your centralized AWS CloudTrail and config logs are going to be. And fun fact, if you're ever taking an AWS certification exam, you have to enable multi-factor delete on these buckets. for whatever reason.
Best practices. That's
Yeah.
another. I was going to say that's another one of our foundational controls. MFA, delete, versioning, all that good stuff.
All those things. So then there's this thing called guardrails, and guardrails are either a config rule or it's a service control policy. So service control policies are implemented at the org and OU level, and there's a limitation on the number, the size of these. I think you can only have like 5 SCPs by default, so you have to push all of the rules into one of these. And luckily, AWS has some good tooling that'll merge all of the rules into single statements and stuff, but you're still limited on the total number of sizes that you can create for these SCPs. So if you've got, a lot of, you know, manual stuff that you're putting in with individual buckets and stuff like that's the SCP is not the place for that. Your SCP should be for your broad kind of controls across individual organizational units, and not for the sub resources within each of those accounts. Like it should be preventative primarily, and then you use other tooling to kind of do some of the reactive stuff. So that's what AWS config comes in. You can write as many AWS config rules as you want. They do get expensive after a while, so you can't literally have thousands and thousands of them. And then, so Hartstead asks, if it sees an account trying to access from a different country, will it lock the account? You could write something like that. So the way that you would implement that would be using a IAM console policy. So you would say, if the source IP is from this geo IP region, or this CIDR or whatever, or if this IP is not from, a trusted location, I'm going to deny access to the console. So like when I do STS assume role, there's a condition in that which allows me to restrict based on the source IP. And there are other things you can do too. I don't think source country is one of the things that's enabled by default in IAM. That is weirdly a thing that you can do in CloudFront. So if you wanted to restrict access to certain things in CloudFront, you can do that by country.
Yeah, that's what I was specifically going to say. Is I know in CloudFront, it's just a drop down country wise, but this way, yeah, I'm assuming you'd have to do it through the IP or the CIDR or something like that, like
Yeah.
blocking that.
And probably the better way, and like you'll hear everyone in security say this, like deny everything
Yep.
until you don't need to deny it. So like if you just explicitly allow certain things and deny everything else, you're in a much better place from a security management perspective. Although it can become onerous for people to kind of figure out what the rules are and how it's all working. So here are a couple examples of guardrails. So enable MFA for the root user. That's a detective guardrail, which means it'll come up with an alert. Disallow public read to S3. Enable AWS config in all regions. That's a preventative guardrail, and it's mandatory, which means it is turned on when you provision an account inside a control tower. Like if you make a new account, boom, that is turned on. Disallow policy changes to the log archive bucket. So you can go and say, hey, this S3 bucket, no one's allowed to change the versioning or the MFA or any of that stuff on it. And you see a couple examples of this now, right? So the guardrail enforcement is done primarily through config and either manual interactions, or you can write Lambda functions that can respond to the config alerts and perform things. I've got some examples of that later, but like I said, the first thing you do is you set up your AWS SSO. We'll walk through that in just a minute here. But yeah, let's imagine we've got this provision thing ready to go. Like our control tower is up and running. What do we do next? So one of the things that's important is to get your network sort of in shape. So the default account factory within control tower will provision certain, a NAT gateway and 3 private subnets and all this stuff. It'll delete the default VPCs, which is a good security practice. So it's really just, hey, what is this whole thing doing? And while all of that is important, I recommend, like if you're not just playing around in AWS, you're going to want to override that default account factory. It's not meant for production. It's just there so people can get started quickly. So you're going to want to write some customizations, and you're going to want to set up a real network base layer. There's something called Cloud WAN now, which is I'm a pretty big fan of it. It's a new service that AWS released, I think, a year and a half ago or so. But it's generally available now, and so it's much better than trying to peer VPCs across regions and use a bunch of different transit gateways and stuff. So I say IPv6 and Cloud WAN are the way to go. You get your network set up, you get all your account baselining set up, and then you're off to the races. Now, a lot of people, sorry, just ignore the QR code on that slide. That's from the past. So that's
I was gonna say, are you gonna
yeah.
teach us? Does that give me like a time machine or something? I can go back 2 weeks. I was on vacation. I was in Disney at Florida, so
I think the link might actually work still, but anyway, there's this thing called AFT, or Account Factory for Terraform. Now, Terraform is a really, really common infrastructure as code platform and language. The language is HCL. People use this to provision accounts all the time. So if you don't want to use the near and dear to my heart CloudFormation and you'd prefer to use Terraform, well, Control Tower supports that. Well, there are a couple gotchas in there, like you can only provision things inside of uh, different like OU. So you have to create a Terraform managed OU underneath the core account, because the core control tower itself is still managed with CloudFormation. But everything under that Terraform OU gets managed by Terraform. And this is really just to support people who have built a lot of this stuff in the past on Terraform without them having to migrate all that work over. So yeah, this is how the provisioning works. You call, hey, provision account API. The account goes and runs all of the different CloudFormation stacks, and then it tells Control Tower, hey, the account's ready, and Control Tower will, either send an email if it's an AWS SSO account inviting the person to log in, or you can set up whatever sort of stuff you want. I'll walk through all this in a minute in the demo. But here's what the dashboard looks like, and we'll show a little bit more of this in a while. But you can see there's some custom guardrails here, like enable encryption on EBS volumes is a custom OU, disallow internet connection. And you can see, it's telling me, this project one OU is non-compliant, and it's a fancy little guardrail, a fancy little dashboard, and it just kind of summarizes all the different things that you're seeing. There are different lifecycle events that exist within Control Tower, and these are very important when you're building your customization. So we'll talk a little bit more about these later. They're actually more than these 8 now, because Control Tower has updated. So I can't remember what the 2 new ones are, but keep that in mind. These are integrated with EventBridge. So what you can do is you can say, every time a new account is created, I'm going to fire off this Lambda function, or I'm going to fire off this step function that's going to go and do a bunch of management for me and set all this stuff up. And yeah, so let's talk, what is it really? So there's no charge for using AWS Control Tower. That said, with the default setup, and you're not spinning up any additional accounts, you're looking at around like $3 a month once the free tier runs out. Now, when you set up the account factory for Terraform, you're looking at another probably $50 a month, maybe less than that. But then the regular account factory with CloudFormation is something like another like $5 or $6 a month. And that's just because it has to create a couple different buckets and rules and keys and things like that to centralize everything in these various accounts. So it's a very modest cost. Now, that cost does scale linearly with the total number of accounts you have and the total number of events that you're generating inside those accounts. So if you've got one account that's generating thousands upon thousands of configs costs, yeah, you're going to be charged for that, because it's going to have to centralize all of that in that security account to be able to do the stuff that you're looking for. So I mean, we've deployed Control Tower probably, I don't know, well over 200 times at this point. We have our own automation and stuff that we've built around it, and so these are some of the lessons that we've learned over the years. Is once it's deployed, you want to do all of your work through the control tower console or APIs or service catalog APIs. You don't want to do manual updates on SCPs that are registered, or on OUs that are registered in control tower. The problem is there's this config drift where control tower has what it thinks is the current state of things, and when you modify things outside of control tower, it doesn't have visibility into that config drift, and it will notice eventually, and it will tell you like, hey, this drift has happened, and like you need to fix it. But you will be blocked from doing anything else in control tower until you fix that drift. So moving our pre-existing AWS accounts into control tower from outside of a registered OU can also be a little bit of a pain. And there's a bunch of different things you need to do, and there's great documentation on this. So like nothing that I'm telling you is undocumented. Like AWS has all of this like very well written. It's just I find all the time people don't actually read the docs. I'm sure you've heard the phrase RTFM. Like you got to go and read this stuff before you make some of these changes, or you're going to be in like scrambling, like pager duties going off. Like you're just going to be in a rush to like try and get everything fixed.
No, I'd
Uh,
rather spend the 5 hours figuring things out than the 10 minutes to read the documentation. Come on, that's what every real builder does, right?
this is the DevOps philosophy, right?
Yep.
So these previously only one account could be provisioned at a time. There's a great solution that's been blogged about from AWS that says how you can do bulk import of accounts and bulk kind of creation of accounts. It is a little bit more work, but it's like one cloud formation template you deploy, and then you pass it a CSV of accounts, and you're off to the races. It's really not that bad. We do it all the time, and I think people balk a little bit about deploying something. No, it's not that hard. Don't worry about it. And then I see this happen all the time. There are SNS topic subscriptions that get created by Control Tower. And if you don't accept the invite from the SNS topic to the email, you will not get the alerts. So you'll see when you first create a Control Tower, you'll see all these emails come in, and don't just send them all to spam. Like you have to click OK, I accept. Otherwise, SNS is not allowed to send you these emails. And then Control Tower doesn't support multi-region KMS or asymmetric keys. There are escape hatches here. Don't use those. Just use a regular like single region KMS key, and yeah. Control Tower by default will delete the default VPC when it creates the Control Tower VPC. You can turn that functionality off right in the console. So this advice about keeping the number of accounts per OU to around 150, this advice is slowly less important. And the reason for this was the performance of Control Tower itself. It used to take quite some time to like scan through everything and like confirm all of it was in the right shape. We have Control Tower deployments at this point that have, well over 5,000 accounts. Like it's pretty massive, and you can do quite a bit. I would not be surprised if we just see this performance and this limit just disappear entirely in the future. So the number of accounts that you have in an OU and the number of regions, like that's like an n squared issue. So, or how many regions are there these days? Is it like 22, 23?
Oh, I think it's more than that.
Oh, well, there's only about like 19 that Control Tower officially supports as managed by Control Tower. So you got the number of accounts in the OU times the number of regions that you're managing. So whenever you register this new OU, you remember that's about how much time it's going to take. And like I said, the performance has gotten better. It gets better every day, but it still takes a little bit. Yeah. All right. And this is the Control Tower Catalyst. So if you want to ignore everything that we're teaching you today and you just want someone to do it for you, we will do that. This is the salesy part. Listen, we do this day in, day out. We've done it for virtually every vertical you can imagine, game companies, healthcare companies, all this good stuff. There's a fixed fee project. You come chat with us. We figure out what it is you need to get done, what sort of compliance regime you need to have. Do you need PCI? Do you need high trust? Do you need ISO 27001? Like, do you need to support messaging over carrier pigeon? And if you need those sorts of things, like we'll go and we'll make it work for you. And we always love this because too many times we've seen people kind of go out into the wild with AWS and the mistakes are made in terms of security and compliance and things like that, and we don't want to see that anymore. All right, how about we jump into a demo?
Sure. What's the going rate on carrier pigeon?
Carrier pigeons these days, I hear the per message cost is about 25 cents.
Oh, cheaper than the post office. Well, but then again, I guess it would probably take a lot longer to get there. So,
all right, I'm going to share my new window here. So give me one moment. Share screen. And hey, Twitch chat, I've been chatting and talking this whole time. Feel free to ask questions. Maybe while I'm sharing this new screen, we can go back to Red Grimoire's question, which is, I have Python that scrapes the website, throws everything it can find in the website into S3. After this, S3 transfer a couple information to another S3, but
TLDR. Just kidding.
Are you using multi-part upload or something when you don't really need it? I like the get and other requests side. I mean, if you're making a bunch of fetches for a bunch of small files, there's probably a better way of packing the payload or something, but I don't know. You're welcome to tweet it at me and I'll see if I can help you, but not sure we're going to be able to solve that on this one. You can rate limit.
Seeing one from Hartstead asking if you can say any big companies you've helped.
I cannot, but if you go to caylent.com and browse our use cases, you might see some folks you know. And I look forward to the day where I can talk about some of the cool things that we've built. So give me another couple months here. I hope to be able to share some good news. All right, so this is the AWS console. Can everybody see it?
There we go.
I can make it a little bigger here. All right, so I just created this account. It's a brand new AWS account. It's never been used before. We're going to click into Control Tower, and we're going to set up a landing zone so you can see how this is done in real time. All righty. So we'll go. I don't care about the region deny feature at all. We're going to hold this in US East 1 because I like US East 1. We'll also create another managed region in US East 2 just for effect. And then it's going to ask me to create these foundational organizational units. So the first one, security. This is the one that's going to contain our accounts around the log archive and then the audit account. And then we've got Sandbox. So next it's going to ask me to put in a couple of different emails. So I'm going to take, it's going to be log archive count. Is that less than 64 characters? $55 characters, great, okay. And then we're gonna do audit. This is my email, by the way, y'all are welcome to email me. And then.
Are you TikTok famous? Do you have a TikTok you want to drop or something?
You should follow me on Twitter.
Twitter.
For as long as it continues to exist, I will be on Twitter. So here it's saying, do we want to use org level cloud trails? If you're making a new control tower, please use org level cloud trails. It's so much easier than the old method of just like centralizing everything. So yeah, go for that. And then, we can enable KMS and create a KMS key for this, but just in the interest of time, I'm going to skip by it. Over here, we're just saying, oh, hey, we're going to, keep this amount of time, like 1 year for regular log retention. And then for the access logs, like these are the CloudTrail kind of things, we're going to keep, I don't know, like let's do 3 years. Okie dokie. And that's it. It's off to the races. We're going to set up our landing zone. And I probably hit some sort of rate limit. All right, so you can see up here, it says the estimated time remaining is about 60 minutes. We can close this browser tab. So rather than make everybody wait around before we hopped on the stream today, I went ahead and provisioned one of these already. So we're gonna hop over into that as soon as I figure out how to log out of this console. Okie dokie. So this is the SSO org that got provisioned for me by AWS. So when I created my control tower, it created this AWS directory. And you can see I've got these accounts, right? So this is the pre-built one. This is the one I built prior to this stream. I'm going to log into the management account, which is this one. And I'm going to log in as an admin because it's a demo. And we'll take a look at a couple different things here. So we're going to go to service catalog, we're going to go to code commit, we're going to go to CloudFormation, but we'll start, and we'll go to AWS organizations, but we're going to start at control tower. Is my screen frozen for anybody, or does it still work for everybody else?
I don't see much happening. I don't know what's supposed to be happening right now, but
Yeah, I just see a
how's
screen.
Is
oh, okay, it changed. Yeah.
Let me set it to share the whole browser instead of just one tab, because I had opened up a bunch of other tabs and I did not realize that it was not gonna share those. There we go. James, you can pull my screen back up.
absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, cool. So that's my bad. Sorry. So basically, from here, it launched a new window, and I was able to get into Control Tower. Okay, so here you can see, like, I've got my 2 organizational units. I've got my 3 accounts. These are the ones that it provisioned for me. I've got my preventative controls. I've got my detective controls, and you can see everything is compliant. Now, the built-in account factory, I have set it to like make no private subnets and to disallow internet acceptable. And I just turned off all the regions for VPC creation. Now I can use this default account factory within the control tower to make a new account. So I can say, like, Randall Hunt plus delete me 001 at Caylent.com, delete me 001. And I'll just even use the same email. And I'm going to provision this in the sandbox OU. And then I can do customizations. So these customizations are where I could go in and I could say, I want to add in, this service catalog product or that service catalog product or whatever. I'm not going to do any of that right now because I just want to show you provisioning a standard account first. So we'll do that. And this will go off, and then we can see, it working away over here in service catalog, or maybe we can't. It's a 400 error.
Who didn't make the sacrifice to the demo gods?
I'm definitely going to hit some sort of rate limit because I've been provisioning accounts all. All right, so we should be able to see. And all these accounts are going to get deleted at the end anyway.
That's
all
nice
right,
for
here we go.
training up. There we go.
Provision products. So what this is doing is this is my account. It's getting provisioned by Control Tower right now. And so what is this going to do? Well, it's going to create a CloudFormation stack. It's going to create the account, and we'll see some of the other stuff that it's going to do. So if I click over here into step functions, you'll see I have these 2 state machines. And these are going to listen to different lifecycle events. And these come for free, by the way, from GitHub. AWS. These come for free from this little template here. And it'll provision everything for you so that you can start doing the customizations. And the other thing that it'll do is it'll create this code commit bucket, which contains your manifest, which, as you can see right now is empty because I haven't put any customizations in it. But you can see what some kind of configurations would look like if I wanted to look at an example configuration. Maybe I'll say, It needs to have this SSM parameter key. It needs to have, can this not scroll? Oh, okay. But you can kind of see what's happening, and you can see it'll group the templates together. So this is create this template, and it'll show you what your policies are. So it'll tell you which preventative guardrails it's going to turn on. And this is just code. So this is, when you edit this code and you ship the pull request, it's going to go out and it's going to, re-provision all this stuff. Like it's going to rebuild it and then update all of your accounts and keep things going. So this is commonly what we would refer to as like GitOps. Having GitOps on the scale that it affects your whole organization is incredibly powerful, a little bit dangerous, but luckily you keep those break glass accounts around. So you can see this is what it provisioned for me by default. Is I got this control tower baseline, I got this control tower baseline, and then this is the one that I provisioned from that GitHub account I just showed you. And this is all in the AWS documentation. You don't need to necessarily follow along, but I'm just kind of giving you an overview of it. And if we go back to control tower, it should tell me that this other account is done provisioning. Yeah. So if we go into Sandbox, so you can see we've got this account. It's been provisioned, and this will update in a little while. It's because it's brand new, and also I probably forgot to turn on organization level security hub access, which we can do right now. So security hub, turn this on.
And so a lot of these control tower ties in like all of this kind of stuff: security hub, systems manager, organizations, all that stuff kind of just gets tied into one control plane, one dashboard kind of thing.
Yes. Well, no, I mean, yes and no. Like the security hub dashboard is where you're going to have a better time looking at security focused events.
Yeah.
The like AWS health dashboard is where you're going to have better stuff, but control tower will like integrate with all those and launch into those sub dashboards.
Yeah. I guess that's what I meant.
Yeah.
I didn't mean like this is it, one stop shop. That'd be nice. But at least it gives you those insights.
My caution against a single pane of glass is that single panes of glass are not redundant. That's why we have double-sided windows, and we've got this is a stupid joke. Sorry.
Works for me.
So we've got this like custom control tower state machine, and this listens for all the lifecycle events. It'll evoke different Lambda functions, so we can go over to Lambda and we can see the kind of customizations that we can build in here. And I had a demo that I was really hoping to make interactive for Twitch chat, but I have hit the account provisioning limit, so we're not entirely sure what to do. So, fun fact on new AWS accounts, when you create an organization, initially you have a limit of 10 accounts. And you can go to like service quotas and request for it to be increased, but there's an easier way. And the easier way of getting around this, and maybe this is a tip I shouldn't share, but just spin up a like T3x large instance for 10 minutes, let it run, do some stuff, click around, wait 20 minutes, and then you can normally get around that limit. I didn't do that, so I'm hitting the limit. But you can see.
Well, Randall, I see a question in the chat from Hartstead. If you wanted to speak on that.
So is Caylent focused mostly on big corporations, or is it also affordable, practical for small business? We're open to pretty much anything. We work with startups, we work with small businesses, we work with enterprise. So we have customers all along the spectrum. Depending on what it is you want to do and what you want to undertake, you're always welcome to hop on the phone with us. Or you can send an email, hello@caylent.com, or you can just tweet at me, and we can figure it out. my goal for this demo today, I really wanted to have Twitch login create a new account. So the architecture of this is you use the Twitch API and the OAuth to go into Cognito, and then you have a Cognito new user Lambda function that fires off. That goes and talks to Service Catalog and says, Service Catalog, hey, provision a new account for me. And then it emails the user who signed in with Twitch the access credentials for that account. And yeah, we had that working, but then I tested it too much.
Yeah.
So that's about it. That's all I have from the demo side. I can click in, I can show anything anybody's interested in, we can go a little deeper on.
Well, I was gonna say I know exactly that feeling, at least when it comes to like when I do AWS game days. I go in and make sure I want to go in and make sure everything's working, and then all of a sudden all my teams are full of me. So I know exactly what that's like. Well, that was great. That helped shed a lot of light on something that I am not entirely familiar with on a hands-on level, and give me something to look into. So when it comes to the catalysts, uh, do you just launch that from within? Like, I'm still. Where do I get? What does the catalyst do exactly? Like,
So a
as far as
catalyst is when we come in and we
got it.
do a workshop, we listen to, oh, I've got to get PCI, I've got to get
Okay.
ISO, whatever. And so we say, okay, great, we've heard you. We come back about 24 hours later and we give you, a series of either Terraform or CloudFormation templates that you can deploy. And then we work side by side with those folks in several workshops. Typically, they're either 2 hours each or 4 hours each. We'll work in those workshops and we'll train the staff on how to use Control Tower. And a lot of times people want to hook up self-service provisioning to like Jira or something. So when I create a new Jira ticket, when that Jira ticket gets approved, go and provision a new AWS account for me. And here's the owner, here are the tags that it needs to use, here's the budget line item. And we've done all of these different integrations between everything from like, I don't know, like ServiceNow to ClickUp to Jira to, I don't know, Apple Notes. Like, I mean, we've done it enough times that we have a lot of templates around it, so we can do it a lot faster than most other people can.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That kind of cleared that up for me.
And I'll show folks one more thing.
Yeah.
This is a solution from AWS. So this is called the Landing Zone Accelerator on AWS, and this is written primarily in CDK. It leverages Control Tower underneath. But if you want a cheat code for kind of getting into compliance and you follow the implementation guideline of this closely, it will do all the right things. It will set everything up. It's very customizable, and it's the kind of way I see a lot of a lot of landing zone deployments going forward in the future. So I would check this one out. It's pretty nifty, and it's all in CDK, and I love CDK.
Yeah. I dropped that
That's
link,
awesome.
that GitHub in the chat there. Sorry, David, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's really awesome. But also, Randall, I was looking at Caylent's website and I saw Caylent Catalyst, AWS Control Tower. I see Caylent Catalyst, AWS Security Guardrails, Caylent Catalyst Enhanced Control Tower. Are these just like different level tiers or different offerings entirely? How do
Yeah,
these work?
so we refer to a catalyst as a fixed fee project. So it's something that's short in duration. It's 2 weeks max. I guess for some of the data stuff that we do, it can go longer, but our goal is to get in, get a customer working with AWS, get them situated, get them educated, and then get out of their way and let them build their product. We have other ways of working with customers. We have traditional time and materials based projects, and then we have this concept called pods, which is where we will kind of put together a team of different disciplines. So we have three primary practices. We've got our data practice, we've got our architecture practice, and we've got our app dev practice. And a lot of different customers, they end up needing they need to pull on all three of those sort of disciplines. They don't just need like data work, they also need app dev work to work with the data work. So we can put together a team of people who have expertise in the customer stack or in the customer's industry, and kind of have them work alongside the people who are running the company. And we've ended up being a trusted partner, a trusted long-term partner for a lot of people. I will say that the things that my teams get most excited about are the projects where we get to build something really cool and really new that hasn't been done before. So if you got something really meaty and difficult, please reach out to us. Like we love that sort of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And what's the best way? Just go to the website and then just
Yeah, you
find the
can.
contact and stuff, or
Yeah, if you go to the website, it'll have a thing that says like contact us in a bunch of different places. If you want to tweet at me, or if you want to email me, that also works. And uh, it's all good fun. We've got a nice blog where we've written about some of the things we've done in the past. We have an MLOps reference architecture blog that I think is pretty interesting and walks through, you know, how we think about data and MLOps in the modern world. And then Swami goes on stage at reInvent and changes it all for us.
nice. Yeah, that's great. Cool. Yeah, well, it's great having you on. If there's any last things you'd like to plug yourself, I'm plugging. I'm doing my part. I'm plugging you on Twitter right here.
I love it.
Um,
Thank you.
if you have a LinkedIn, if people are there, I didn't even does Caylent. I have the Caylent survey. Is there? Do they have any other like mailing lists I can drop in?
No, I
Or
mean everything is on our website, and
okay,
we have a newsletter if you're interested. Um, yeah, I think the best way to keep up with us, we post a lot on Twitter and we'll post a lot on LinkedIn. And we're also hiring. We're hiring like crazy. So if you're a software engineer or cloud architect and looking for a role, we are hiring in Canada, North America and Latin America. So reach out to us. We've got a bunch of open roles.
absolutely. Yeah,
I see.
that's definitely good information. On top of everything, like on top of everything else that you taught us and shown us today. So yeah, so all you prospective, uh, there was someone saying they were a junior. Red Grimoire was saying that. Hit him up, see maybe he can help you out. Um, cool. And for myself, I'm going to drop this again. Um, if anyone watching can fill out the link or fill out our survey for Howdy Partner and let us know what you want to see, what you liked, what you felt was the best, what you felt was the worst. Uh, Randall, you know that AWS, we love our surveys. Like that's our bread and butter. So um, if you can, I'm gonna drop it one more time in here. So just yeah, if people can fill out our survey and hook us up. David, do you have anything you want to plug?
Um,
Dinosaurs
for
rule.
those dinosaurs do rule, but also for anyone watching that just wants to learn a little bit more, I saw some people talking about being juniors. If you're interested in ML at all, Deep Racer, really cool. Play with Deep Racer. I love Deep Racer, so something that I'm really getting more involved in. And we do all sorts of events, virtual races. Build yourself a Deep Racer model and enter in, and perks and prizes, and just a lot of fun, bragging rights. So, plus you learn something cool. Yeah, that's all I've got.
Yeah, Deep Racer is awesome. We have one last question. It looks like from Hartstead. Not a dumb question. Is SaaS more secure because local software could be altered and not a lot of tracking? Your software is only as good as your developers and your infrastructure. AWS, one of our famous things is the shared responsibility model. Um, you never know. Like a SaaS could be just as bad as anything else. You know, you hear about leaks all the time. Um, just because you're paying someone else to do it doesn't mean it's better necessarily. I don't know if anyone else can speak to that at all, but you're
Yeah, I think SaaS. There's this thing called a shared responsibility model that exists within the gross majority of the software that we use, and so you know, AWS is good at keeping the data centers all tight and taken care of, but at some point, you as a developer, you as an operator, you still have a responsibility to secure the things that are within your control. And there's a lot of foot guns out there. Like there's a lot of ways you can just kind of mess up, and so it's always nice to use tools like the trusted advisor and well architected framework and things like that can kind of give you advice as you're building in AWS, especially if you're new. um, and then yeah, I think saying that SaaS is more secure just because it's SaaS is, it might be uh, true in the market just from the way that things are operating, but it's not necessarily true. It's very much like it's not guaranteed to be correct. I mean, we've all seen SaaS providers who have had security snafus over the years. So
yeah. And I was gonna say, chances are that if they are not secure, they're not going to be a SaaS for long, just by the market dictating that people are not going to use it. So um, I know in our role, one of our big things that we do with partners is I've mentioned it a couple times, workload validations. So chances are, if you're using one of the AWS partners such as Caylent, it's been vetted. Everything should be good to go, and you can put that trust in the partners like Caylent and in AWS.
yeah,
So I mean,
and we've built systems that have scaled to millions of requests per second and maintain security for customers. It's job zero for us, and it should be for any partner. It's not just Canon. Like every partner out there,
yeah,
security is job zero. So AWS has a pretty rigorous way of validating partners. So there's this thing called the Service Delivery Program, the SDP.
yep.
We have a number of different SDPs for services that we've worked on, and that's proven experience where we have to fill out this very long validation spreadsheet and post in all these pieces of evidence to prove that we really did what we said we did. And then we have to get customer testimonials and all this other good stuff. And then we have to present to a third party auditor who then has to approve us and say like, hey, yes, this person's approved. And then there are things called competencies, which are much the same, but they cover a broad suite of services. So I'm very pleased to announce today that Caylent received their data and analytics competency. So
Oh,
that was
nice.
something that we've been working on for a while. It takes a lot of effort. So we'll do
Nice.
a big post about that later, but good fun. I mean, I think I can hang around for a little bit because we had booked longer. So if you want me to shut up, just send me a message and I'll shut up. But I saw some questions from like Red Grimoire and others about like being junior and stuff, and like there's no substitution, there's no compression algorithm for experience, right? Like you need to get
Yeah.
hands on, and there are great ways of doing that. Like AWS Skill Builder, the training portal, being able to spin up lab accounts that get shut down automatically when you're done with them, and so you don't have to worry about runaway bills or anything like that. Getting that hands-on experience, really working with things, is the way you learn. I mean, you can read about how direct connect works a million different times, but one of the best learning experiences I ever had is um, in Seattle. They have this thing at AWS called the Direct Connect Lab, where SAs can go and actually provision direct connect links and see what's really happening. And until you get that hands-on experience, you never fully appreciate uh, what goes into things. I would say the solutions architect exam, like the associate exams, those are no longer required. They're a good knowledge check for yourself. But as a hiring manager, like I don't really see any value in the associate exam. It's relatively trivial to pass if you've got, you know, less than a year of working with AWS. The professional exam is a completely different story. To pass the AWS professional so the AWS Solutions Architect Professional exam, there is no way that you haven't worked with AWS before. You can't just memorize everything and pass that exam. You really do need that hands-on real-world experience. So whenever I see that on a resume, I always consider that a very strong hiring signal. It is not in and of itself a reason to hire, but it is a strong signal. And then the other thing is, I think people sleep too often on like figuring out why things are the way they are. So at Caylent, we bias for hiring passionate autodidacts. So people who will go and teach themselves. They're not just asking, "Oh, what time is it?" They're like, "Oh, I wonder how this watch works." Like, if you find yourself constantly cultivating an atmosphere of curiosity and cultivating a behavior of curiosity in yourself and in others, and inspiring others, bringing them along with your excitement about this thing that you've just learned, you're going to fit in amazingly well here at Caylent. And frankly, you should do well anywhere. And I think it's just a really good kind of mental capacity to foster and feed.
Yeah. Definitely speaking about the professional exam, I passed it myself, and I've literally, I'm an employee here, and I've worked, in it, and it was no easy task. Uh, so yeah, if you see that badge on someone's resume or in their email, that one specifically, yeah, you'll get some eyes. So I do recommend that. You won't pass without having been able to do stuff yourself. And yeah, learn and be curious. One of our leadership principles that was one that spoke. That's probably when people ask what's my favorite. That's the one that speaks to me, because that's when I get to see the cool stuff and learn about the cool stuff. Is just by seeing something and going, how does it work? How do I build that? Um, David, I know you mentioned you learned best for stuff using workshops. Do you want to talk about that for a second or two?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hands-on is certainly how I learn. That's how I learn best. And so, in studying for the exams, I think the biggest payoff wasn't necessarily the exam itself, but just everything I learned in the process of studying for those exams. Actually, getting some hands-on and building things, that was just crucial. It was really just a big moment where that light bulb kind of clicked, and I started figuring things out. And I'm still learning. Like, you're always going to be learning, and so I have become addicted to going into workshops and just creating new things. Anything that I can find, whether it's on Skill Builder or the AWS workshops or anything. There's other sources out there too. Uh, some paid, some free, digging into free tier stuff. I mean, there's just so many things. You can even find workshops on GitHub that others have created. It's just so many opportunities to find hands-on out there, and it really helps me. I was going through tutorials and practice exams and reading white papers and banging my head against the wall. And it wasn't until I started getting that hands-on that things started making more sense.
Yeah, and that's how Randall said. Basically, you have to build. You have to get your hands dirty for stuff to stick and actually understand how things work together. Which is why I really like this conversation we had today. I learned about OUs and control tower and stuff from my solutions architect professional, but I didn't have a ton of experience, just because that's one of those things that is a little bit more difficult to get your hands dirty, in my opinion. I mean, you can provision a bunch of accounts, but that is, and stuff like that, but that isn't as simple as building something in Lambda or something. I mean, they're both very difficult. Don't get me wrong. It's just that they're different kind of difficulty, that adminning kind of stuff versus that coding kind of stuff.
And
Absolutely.
I really love infrastructure as code too, because I see it
Yes.
as the serialization of the understanding of what you're building. If you can codify, and I stole that quote from Kelsey Hightower, but automation is the serialization of understanding. It is saying, I understand this architecture well enough that I am confident in my ability to represent it in code so that another person can impute that understanding of the architecture as well, and so that it can be executed upon. Like when we treat infrastructure as code as both a communication medium and as an execution medium, it becomes this very, very powerful tool that we can use to share knowledge quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way. Yeah, you can't automate some, I mean, you can try to, but it won't work. You can't really automate something unless you know exactly what every single part of it is going to do and every piece is going to do. But yeah, cool. Well, I think that about wraps us up. What's Cockapoo and AWS 2? There are a lot of hidden differences in the APIs. I'm going to pop this on the screen real quick.
Oh yeah, the most common one, and this is again, this is because of, so just to read the question, it's like there are a lot of hidden differences in the APIs. Like you might learn like the recognition API uses bucket and key, whereas another API, or sorry, it uses bucket and name of object instead of, whereas the S3 API itself uses bucket and key. So those API differences, the reason they exist is because these services were not developed at the same time. Like they are developed over years and years and years, and different practices and different capabilities exist in 2012 than existed in 2009, that exist in 2023, that existed in like 2012. So the evolution of APIs is something that you have to keep up with. A fun story from when Amazon Lex came out, all of the AWS SDKs would construct a packet over HTTP to be able to talk to the services, and they use something called IAM, Identity Access Management, and they use something called SIGV4 to sign these requests and create them. Now, the problem with the Lex API is that it deals with streaming media, streaming audio, and then responses. You had to set certain headers. None of the SDKs originally supported this. So whenever Lex came out, like I don't know, I can't remember what year it was. Maybe it was 2016. We ended up having to rush to change all the SDKs, and so there were all these little, I even made a little Python library called Baby Lex to keep up with the API, because you know the evolution and change of these APIs is always going to increase in complexity, and trying to maintain standardization when you have all these disparate products that are doing all these different things, I don't think it's worth it. I think it slows you down too much. Like you should strive for it. It should definitely be like the bar that you try to get to. But if you miss a couple times, but you release this amazing product, then hey, I can remember the difference between next token and page.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm not an AWS apologist. Like workstocks is like the weirdest thing I ever.
Anyway, that's a whole nother conversation about those kind of things. Cool. Need to go. It's 12:30 in the morning. Go get some sleep. Anelia? I don't know how to say it, but cool. Well, thank you for coming on, Randall. It was great talking to you, learning from you, and my co-host David. I guess we're gonna check out and sign off, and check us out next week, next Wednesday, 2 p.m. Pacific time. We are going to be having Alteryx on with us, and they're going to be showing us some cool stuff. They're going to show us their machine learning model as it relates to League of Legends, which might be kind of interesting for not just the tech group, but we're on Twitch, so maybe it'll interest some of the gamers out there. And we'd love to have you on. And Randall, I'd love to have you on back again some other time in the future, definitely.
Always happy. Thanks so much for having me, James. Thanks, David.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank
Cool.
you, Randall.
All right. See everyone later. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.